Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Caregiver Crosswalk, Dementia Care Consulting. Never roam alone.
And welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Matt Del Vecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing in the senior living industry.
And I'm Corey Sirota, clinical social worker and author of Someone Died, Now What? Matt, have you ever heard of this, about this rush in cosmetic facial operations?
I read about it. So the cosmetic surgeries are actually going up around the world because I guess the thinking is one day masks won't need to be worn as frequently. So why not get some cosmetic facial surgery done while you can wear a mask, and very little people will be realizing you've had it done. So I guess it kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
I guess so. Interesting. Very interesting.
So you need a little tuck,
twist, tuck,
your
injection.
lips done, your nose done. Now's the time. Go for it. Oh, boy. I've been looking forward to this particular segment for a long time. I never heard of this.
So we're going to get right into it. I don't know if people are familiar with the concept of, or the term doula, typically known as someone who helps women as they deliver, or families as they're going through the delivery process. Well, I was fortunate to meet a death doula. I was teaching a course at McGill on grief, loss, and bereavement, and one of my students brought this woman into the class, and she was talking about being a death doula, and I said, Denise, I need to talk to you, because I was fascinated by what she does. Basically, she helps transition with people transition, I guess, through, well, I'm not explaining it well, but she certainly will. So welcome to the show, Denise.
Hi, nice to be here.
So I just butchered that definition. So let's start off with, what exactly is a death doula?
Well, a death doula is somebody who has been trained to accompany someone and their loved ones through the process of dying or preparing to die. And we can provide counsel, we can provide support, we can even advise on ideas of how to approach death and what people want to do, how people want to die, and we're there for all of it.
It makes a lot of sense, even though we haven't heard of it. And Denise, I'm very interested because I had not heard of the term. How did you even get into this profession, and is it considered a profession?
It's not regulated as a profession, but I consider it one.
You've been trained, I
Yes.
understand, and it was just, I guess, something that you had a liking to.
Yeah, you said, how did I get into this profession? But somehow or other, I think it got into me. And it's always been there. It's something that really calls to me to be able to help people at such a momentous time of your life, right? This is like the closing chapter. For me, it's wow. It's the most moving experience ever.
So let's kind of get into the nitty-gritty of it. How do you typically support a dying person and their family?
That can vary a lot depending on the situation, depending on when they contact me. I've had people contact me when they're still relatively healthy at a first diagnosis. And then we just work through like advice, like what do I need to do? I can give them advice on that. I can help them plan their vigil. A lot of people want to be surrounded by their families. A lot of people want all kinds of like parties, and so I'm there to help them plan through that, and I'm there to answer questions for the family and what they can do and stuff. So yeah.
It's quite interesting talking here with Denise Lefebvre, a death doula specializing in end-of-life care and support. And, it makes a lot of sense because for many families, maybe this is the first time dealing with a close family member. And here you are being able to guide and support them. This is something you do all the time. And I would imagine you have gone and seen all types of emotions. If you were to narrow it down to the one emotion that you see the most when working with dying people, what would that be?
Well, that's pretty common one, fear. There's there's a lot of fear involved because we don't talk about death, so it's one of those things that we really know very little about. A lot of questions that I get are concerning, new symptoms. So is this it? Am I dying now? Or, people seem to want to know when they're actively dying, and there's that fear. And there's the family, the loved ones that surround them are also living in fear, because how is this going to be? Is it going to be painful for them? Is it going to be gross? Is it going to be... There's so much fear about every little aspect of it because we're so distanced from death.
So I appreciate what you're saying, and I imagine it is a hugely emotional experience being there, being with the family. You mentioned about pain. So it makes sense to me that I think when you presented in class, we talked about how that was probably one of the number one fears was that it was going to hurt. How do you talk to them about what it's going to feel like?
Well, I usually preface any conversations with, I cannot say 100% what it's going to feel like.
Fair.
I haven't died yet. Yet. I think what I can generally tell people is that pain is the one thing that will be managed for them, no matter what. No matter where you are, pain will be managed unless you don't want it. And I think the biggest pain is the emotional pain for everyone.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that, and you're listening to Life Unrehearsed with Matt and Corey, and we're talking to a death doula, Denise Lefebvre, and I would imagine, Denise, one of your best and most important values that you bring is that emotional support, because there is so much unknown. I know when I help with seniors in transition and talking to adult children, it's the emotional support that seems to be the most valued. And would you say that's the same for you, that emotional support for families?
I definitely concur. I think there's even times when people aren't entirely sure what emotion they're having because it's just all overwhelming. It's just to have a calming, secure presence there with them. It seems to make it a little bit easier to go through and feel the things that we're feeling and everything because they feel supported. So, yeah, 100% I agree with you.
Well, that makes sense. I'm wondering where you do your work, or do you do it in different places, like a hospital? Do you go into homes, both?
I will go where I'm needed. It depends. Like COVID has limited where I can go at some points, but I will go into people's homes. I will go into palliative care residences. I go where people are. Where they're comfortable.
It's interesting you say that. I'm on the board of directors of Nova West Island, and they've got these wonderful, I call them angels. They're nurses that would actually go into the homes and do a lot of palliative care. And I would imagine that's something that is appreciated. If you can actually go to and be flexible like you are, go to their homes or go where you need to be there. I think that's crucial from your perspective to be able to we talked about emotions, and that will put them at ease, so you're not disrupting too much.
Yeah, I think that's the most important part. We don't want people to feel more uncomfortable when they're, looking at death. We want them to be as comfortable as possible and to feel safe.
No question about that. And I think that I can hear from your voice. you provide that safe, calming, when you're comfortable. Yes. Bottom line, when you're comfortable with the topic and working with families like that, it's invaluable. We have to go out to traffic, but when we come back, we're going to hear one of those unbelievable, I imagine there's many powerful moments, but one of those moments with a family. So stay tuned.
Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Leanna Senior Transition Support, specialists in downsizing and seniors residences.
Welcome back. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corey Sirota, along with my co-host, Matt Delvecchio, and we are talking to Denise Lefebvre, who is a death doula specializing in end-of-life care and support. Denise, we are sitting with bated breath, waiting to hear perhaps an experience or one of those powerful moments that you have had with a family. Is there one in particular that resonates with you?
Since you first approached me, I've been trying to think of one in particular that resonates. there's no one in particular because it's also very important to me. Each one is very important, but I think there was one occasion where the client just spoke to me like directly and said, thanked me and called me a miracle. You know, like I was a miracle for her, and I understood at that point that the depth of gratitude and impact for what I'm doing is that people can talk openly about what they're feeling as they're dying. And all of the emotions with that. And I think that conversation when she called me her miracle, for me it was like, okay, wow, this is really important. This is the work that this is why I'm doing this work.
Mm-hmm. I think you're bringing up such a good and an important point, Denise, because let's face it, death is inevitable, but it seems to be this is a topic that many people want to avoid. There's a lot of denial and there's a lot of fear. It's just conversations aren't as easy to come by. And so from your perspective, what would you suggest to family members? For what should they do or say in order to be supportive to someone who is dying?
Oh, that's a big one. I think my opinion on that may have changed a little bit since I first started, but I think keep in mind that you're not the one dying, and the person who is actually approaching death has a lot of stuff on their mind. They're afraid. This is uncharted territory because so far, not a lot of people come back and tell us about it. So I think support the person in what they're feeling, listen, but don't put too much of your own stuff on them. I know it's a tough period, and if you can find somebody to talk to, that's fine. But just think a little bit about what the person's going through and how scary that must be, and just support them like that.
That's Denise Lefebvre. She's a death doula, and she is just blown me away with that response because you couldn't have said it better in terms of helping those. It's not about them. It's about the person who's dying, although they have their own issues and concerns that they have to deal with. So, but remembering, putting things in perspective, and almost it sounds to me like you're their advocate, the person who's dying, and that's a gift. That's absolutely a gift. That said, I've worked with obviously a lot of families as well, grieving families, and it's not always, crisis brings out the best and also the worst, unfortunately, in families. Have you ever seen any disagreements between families about how to help support the terminally ill person?
Oh, heavens.
That you're allowed to talk about on radio.
I don't think that I would bring up anything. First of all, I don't want to give anybody any ideas. But I will say that it is an extremely trying moment in family life, and whatever the dynamics are in regular life, they're only going to intensify at the deathbed. So you may not get the apology you've wanted. You may not, agree with the way that your sister, your brother, your uncle, whatever wants to deal with things. It's going to be a rough, bumpy ride.
Yeah, and inevitably there's going to be some sibling disagreements. Put the emotion aside, which is just exaggerating everything, but there will be, and not too often, where everyone's going to be on the exact same page, particularly with lots of siblings involved. One of it, we just got a text actually as you were speaking, and I think it's a very important text to say, simply be a good listener. And I think that is so important. Sometimes that's all it really takes is for someone to listen to their issues, to their problems, to their fear. And you may not even have to respond to it, but just acknowledging it.
How much of your job would you say, or the work you're doing, is listening versus talking?
I would say probably about 60% of it is just active listening. Yeah, just paying attention to what people are saying, and also to what people aren't saying.
Absolutely. All the attending behaviors.
Equally
Do you ever get any sort of, I'll call them naysayers? I don't know what else to call them, of people that are like, you do what? Yeah. Like, what's the reaction from people other than the families you're working with?
Well, I think you said the exact words. Maybe not in that. You do what? People are really stunned to hear what I do, and they think it's the most courageous thing in the world because, of course, everybody's afraid of death, right? Mm-hmm. Or most people are. But yeah, shock is a lot of the response that I get because people just don't understand how you can do that work.
And that work is called a death doula. This is Denise Lefebvre, who is a death doula, talking to us on Life Unrehearsed. And Denise, you don't have to answer this question, but I would imagine your services aren't free. But for those like myself that didn't even know it existed, I think it's actually a very interesting concept, which makes sense. How does it work? Do you have to charge on an hourly basis, a contract basis? How do people approach you on this?
Well, I have varying fees. I can work on a sliding scale, mainly because I don't think anybody should not have a death doula because they can't afford it. But that said, I mean, I do have a regular hourly rate, but I can do packages for people. Like you can book me for 8 hours and maybe save on the hourly rate, or you can say I need this, and we'll work out a contract and see what you need, and then we'll go from there. Like I said, you don't go into this for the money because it's not what it's about.
Well, we could hear the compassion and empathy in your voice, and I'm sure in what you do. And like you said, there are many families that have picked up the phone. You've even said it to thank you in their need. So we want to thank you for coming on the show, Denise, and taking some time with us. I'm sure there's some of our listeners that are wondering, how do we get a hold of you?
Yeah. Well. I do have a website. I have a Facebook page. The website is I don't if I can say it on
Sure,
on
yeah,
air.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Thanadoula, THANA as in death. Thanadoula Denise at gmail .com. Mm-hmm. And just look for Denise Lefebvre. You will find me. There's only 5 of me in Quebec.
Yeah, right. No, that's great. And that's Lefebvre, Lefebvre. Denise, thank you very much for coming on Life Unrehearsed.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Which is, you don't think about death doulas as a blast. Okay, but thank you. I appreciate you giving us your generosity of your time and your expertise.
Thank you very much. All right, Corey, what do we have coming up next week?
Next week on Life Unrehearsed, demystifying vaccinations and immunization. So much has been said over the last couple of weeks, and there's a lot of confusion. So wait until you hear about an expert opinion. Dr. Michael Libman, who is the director of the J.D. McLean Center for Tropical Medicine at McGill. He's coming on to share some of his wisdom with us.
And a unique intake from a tropical medicine perspective. Looking forward to having him. And we're also looking forward to having an interview with fashion icon Simon Chang. Can't wait for that one. He's well known throughout North America about his many clothing lines. Many of you already know that. But did you know that he's based right here in Montreal, and he's one of our country's leading philanthropists? So that's next week. We want to thank you very much for listening. Many thanks to our technical producer, David Simon, and you could join us every Sunday at 4 p.m. on CJD 800.